Ethan had always believed evenings were meant to soften the edges of the day, not sharpen them. Yet as he drove home beneath a sky bruised purple by the fading sun, his thoughts felt uncomfortably clear. The radio murmured a song he didn't recognize, and the city slipped past in blurred fragments, storefront lights, slow traffic, the occasional pedestrian hurrying home. He should have been thinking about Ryan, about dinner plans or the movie they'd postponed for the third time that week. Instead, he was thinking about silence. Ryan wasn't unkind or distant by nature. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who remembered anniversaries and folded laundry with careful precision. They had been together long enough for routine to replace discovery, and Ethan had told himself that was what adulthood looked like. Still, lately, their conversations felt like checklists rather than connections. Words were exchanged, not shared. Even affection seemed scheduled, as if intimacy required prior approval. The road narrowed ahead, forcing Ethan to slow. Orange cones appeared like sudden punctuation marks, and a reflective sign announced a police checkpoint. He sighed, easing his foot onto the brake. It had been a long day, and the idea of small talk with an officer felt like an unnecessary test of patience. He rolled down his window and waited, fingers tapping the steering wheel. A uniformed figure approached, posture relaxed but alert. The officer's name badge caught the light briefly, Alex Carter, before his face came into view. He wasn't imposing in the way Ethan expected. There was something measured about him, a calm attentiveness that felt deliberate rather than rehearsed. "Good evening," Alex said, voice even. "License and registration, please." Ethan handed him over, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. The contact was accidental, meaningless by any reasonable standard, yet Ethan felt an unexpected jolt, like static before a storm. He told himself it was exhaustion, nothing more. Alex glanced at the documents, then back at Ethan. "Long day." Ethan nodded. "Something like that." The question was casual, but the way Alex asked it suggested genuine curiosity, not obligation. Ethan realized, with mild surprise, that he was being truly looked at. Not assessed or processed, just noticed. "Everything checks out," Alex said after a moment, returning the documents. "You're good to go. Drive safe." Ethan hesitated, unsure why his foot didn't immediately press the accelerator. "Thanks," he said, and then, as if compelled by an unfamiliar impulse, added, "Busy night." Alex's mouth curved into a small smile. "They usually are. People get restless when the day ends." The words lingered longer than they should have. Ethan nodded, pulled forward, and merged back onto the road. In the rearview mirror, he caught a final glimpse of Alex turning toward the next car, already absorbed back into duty. The moment should have ended there. But it didn't. The rest of the drive passed in a haze. Ethan replayed the exchange with uncomfortable precision, the tone of Alex's voice, the steadiness of his gaze, the ease of that brief smile. It made no sense to feel affected by something so ordinary. And yet, the feeling followed him like a question without an answer. At home, the apartment lights were on, casting warm rectangles onto the floor. Ryan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring something that smelled faintly of garlic and herbs. He looked up and smiled, the familiar expression tugging gently at Ethan's chest. "You're late," Ryan said, not accusingly. "Checkpoint," Ethan replied, hanging up his jacket. The word sounded heavier than it should have. Ryan nodded and returned to the stove. "Dinner's almost ready." They ate together, exchanged updates about the days, and discussed nothing that mattered enough to linger on. Ethan laughed at the right moments, responded when prompted, and wondered when presence had become performance. As they cleaned up, Ryan reached for his hand, squeezing it with quiet affection. Ethan squeezed back, guilt threading itself into the gesture. Later, lying awake beside Ryan's steady breathing, Ethan stared at the ceiling. The image of flashing lights and reflective fabric returned uninvited. He told himself it was harmless, a fleeting distraction born of routine and fatigue. Tomorrow, it would fade. Tomorrow, everything would return to normal. Yet as sleep finally claimed him, one thought remained stubbornly awake: something had shifted at that checkpoint, and Ethan wasn't certain he wanted it undone. The days that followed should have diluted the memory of the checkpoint, but instead it settled deeper into Ethan's thoughts, reshaping ordinary moments. At work, he caught himself staring too long at nothing, his mind drifting back to the calm cadence of Alex Carter's voice. He felt foolish for it, irritated by his own imagination. A stranger was not a fracture point. A glance was not a promise. Still, the sense of being seen lingered in a way that unsettled him. At home, the quiet between him and Ryan grew more noticeable. It wasn't hostile or dramatic, it was polite, almost courteous. Ryan asked how Ethan's day had been, listened, nodded, and offered practical advice when it wasn't needed. They shared a bed, shared meals, shared a life that functioned smoothly enough to avoid scrutiny. Yet Ethan felt as if he were living beside his own reflection, familiar, close, and unreachable. One evening, Ryan mentioned plans for the weekend, something about visiting friends and discussing future travel. Ethan agreed automatically, his assent arriving faster than his conviction. As Ryan spoke, Ethan wondered when future had become a word that made his chest tighten instead of lift. 2 nights later, the road funneled him back toward the same stretch of asphalt. Ethan noticed the cones before he registered the feeling, anticipation sharp enough to startle him. He told himself coincidence was common, that checkpoints rotated, that this meant nothing. Still, his pulse quickened as he slowed the car. Alex stepped into view again, reflective vest glowing under the streetlights. The recognition was mutual this time. Alex's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable, as he approached Ethan's window. "Evening," Alex said. "We meet again." Ethan smiled before he could stop himself. "Looks like it." Their exchange followed protocol at first, but the familiarity changed its texture. Alex asked about Ethan's night, not as a formality but as a continuation. Ethan answered honestly, admitting it had been long. Alex nodded, as if that answer fit into a larger understanding. "You live nearby?" Alex asked, handing back the documents. "Not far," Ethan replied. "Just past the old bridge." Alex glanced down the road. "That area gets quiet this time of night." "So do most things," Ethan said, surprising himself. Alex looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. "Yeah," he said softly. "They do." The pause that followed was charged with restraint. Neither man crossed a visible line, yet both seemed aware of its presence. A car honked behind Ethan, breaking the moment. Alex stepped back, professionalism reasserting itself like armor. "Drive safe, Ethan." Hearing his name from Alex's mouth felt intimate in a way Ethan couldn't rationalize. He drove on, hands steady but thoughts racing. This time, the memory didn't feel accidental. It felt chosen. That night, Ryan fell asleep early, turning away as he always did when exhaustion claimed him. Ethan lay awake, replaying the conversation, dissecting tone and timing as if meaning might reveal itself through repetition. He recognized the danger in this habit even as he indulged it. Attention, once withheld, had a way of becoming addictive. Over the next few days, Ethan caught himself editing truths. When Ryan asked why he seemed distracted, Ethan blamed work. When Ryan suggested a quiet night together, Ethan agreed but remained distant, his presence split between what was and what might be. Each omission felt small, defensible. Together, they formed a quiet betrayal. The third encounter came without ceremony. The checkpoint was there again, inevitable as a thought Ethan hadn't learned how to silence. This time, Alex's greeting carried warmth, familiarity no longer disguised. "You ever feel like some places keep calling you back?" Alex asked casually, as if discussing traffic patterns. Ethan met his gaze. "More than I'd like to admit." Alex exhaled, a sound that carried more weight than words. "Me too." There was no confession, no explicit acknowledgement, yet something passed between them, an understanding shaped by restraint. Alex leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I'm usually here on Wednesdays." The information was offered lightly, but its intention was unmistakable. Ethan nodded, the choice already forming inside him. "Good to know." As he drove away, guilt surfaced again, sharper this time. He hadn't touched Alex, hadn't spoken words he couldn't defend, but he knew the truth he was avoiding. His loyalty to Ryan was no longer unquestioned. It was being negotiated in silence. That night, Ethan stood by the bedroom window, watching the city lights flicker like distant signals. He understood now that what was beginning wasn't sudden or reckless. It was deliberate, and that knowledge made it impossible to pretend he was innocent as he waited for Wednesday to come. Wednesday arrived with the quiet insistence of a promise Ethan had never spoken aloud. All day, his focus fractured into smaller, useless pieces. He answered emails without absorbing their meaning, nodded through conversations he would later forget, and checked the time more often than necessary. He told himself he was only curious, that he wanted clarity, an ending to the tension that had settled under his skin. Curiosity, he reasoned, was not a crime. Ryan noticed his restlessness that evening. "You seem somewhere else," he said gently, not accusing, just observant. Ethan forced a smile. "Just tired." Ryan accepted the answer the way he accepted most things lately, with trust that required no proof. That trust pressed against Ethan's chest long after he left the apartment, heavier than guilt because it was undeserved. The checkpoint was quieter than usual. Fewer cars, fewer interruptions. Alex stood near a patrol vehicle, arms crossed loosely, posture relaxed but alert. When he saw Ethan's car approach, something unreadable crossed his face before settling into calm recognition. "Right on time," Alex said once Ethan had stopped. Ethan frowned. "You say that like it matters." Alex's mouth curved slightly. "Maybe it does." Protocol followed, but barely. The exchange felt like a formality they both tolerated rather than observed. When traffic thinned completely, Alex gestured toward a dimly lit area near the shoulder of the road. "Pull over there for a moment," he said. "Just routine." Ethan complied, heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation he no longer tried to separate. Alex joined him beside the car, the distance between them careful, intentional. "This is probably where I should remind you I'm on duty," Alex said quietly. "And this is probably where I should say I'm taken," Ethan replied. They shared a look that acknowledged both truths without resolving either. The air between them felt charged, as if any movement might shatter something fragile. "I don't usually do this," Alex said. "Let things blur." Ethan nodded. "Neither do I." Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of distant traffic. Ethan became acutely aware of his own breathing, of the way Alex's presence seemed to steady and unsettle him at once. He thought of Ryan, of shared mornings, of quiet loyalty, of a life built carefully over time. He also thought of the emptiness that had crept in unnoticed, the conversations that no longer surprised him. Alex spoke again, softer now. "Sometimes I feel like I'm enforcing rules in my own life that don't fit anymore." Ethan swallowed. "Sometimes I feel like I'm following them just because I always have." The admission felt dangerous, intimate. Alex stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the tension in his jaw, the restraint in his eyes. For a moment, Ethan thought Alex might reach out. He realized, with startling clarity, that part of him wanted that line crossed, wanted the choice taken out of his hands. Instead, Alex stopped. "This is where it gets complicated," he said. Ethan exhaled slowly. "It already is." They didn't touch. The absence of contact felt louder than any action. Ethan understood then that what bound them wasn't the promise of something physical but the recognition of a shared fracture, a mutual longing for a life that felt more honest. "I can't pretend this is nothing," Alex said. "But I won't pretend it's simple either." Ethan nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "I just know I haven't been telling the whole truth." Alex stepped back, restoring a careful distance. "Then maybe the question isn't about us." Ethan knew he was right. The realization didn't make it easier. A radio crackled from Alex's shoulder, pulling him back into the world of duty. He glanced toward the sound, then back at Ethan. "You should go." Ethan opened the car door but hesitated. "Will I see you again?" Alex considered the question longer than necessary. "That depends on what you decide when you're not here." Ethan drove away slowly, the road ahead unfamiliar despite its familiarity. His phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, "Drive safe. I'll be awake." The words felt like an anchor and a weight. As the checkpoint disappeared in his mirrors, Ethan understood that he had reached the edge of something irreversible. He hadn't crossed it yet, but he was standing close enough to feel the drop. And for the first time, he knew that choosing nothing was no longer an option. The days that followed were quieter, but heavier, filled with the weight of unspoken truths. Ethan moved through his routine with a mechanical precision that would have fooled anyone who looked closely. Ryan noticed the subtle changes, the way Ethan's eyes lingered a fraction longer on the door, the way he seemed lost in thought even during conversation, but he said nothing. His silence was trust, but it pressed on Ethan like the calm before a storm. Ethan's mind, however, was far from still. Each passing moment seemed to pull him back to Alex, back to the checkpoint, to the tension between restraint and desire. He replayed their last exchange over and over, imagining words left unsaid, glances misread or deliberately interpreted. The awareness that he was crossing an emotional boundary gnawed at him, sharp and persistent, but he could not stop himself. He told himself it was curiosity. He told himself it was human. Deep down, he feared he already knew it was something more. One evening, Ethan returned to the checkpoint with a reason he knew was flimsy. He had missed a detour sign on his way home. The excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears, but Alex was there, waiting with the same calm vigilance as always. Their eyes met before words were exchanged, and Ethan felt the familiar jolt, a recognition that went beyond casual familiarity. "Back again," Alex said, his voice carrying the faintest note of amusement. "I missed the detour," Ethan replied, catching himself in a weak attempt at levity. Alex studied him, eyes sharp but unreadable. "Right, well, I hope everything's in order this time." They talked briefly, still adhering to the ritual of protocol, but the air between them carried an invisible charge. Ethan noticed the subtle shifts, the way Alex's posture relaxed when he believed no one was watching, the slight lift of his eyebrows that suggested a question unspoken. Each detail became a thread Ethan could not resist pulling, unraveling the carefully woven fabric of his life. After clearing the checkpoint, Ethan drove a few blocks and parked along the curb, heart pounding, mind racing. He didn't know what compelled him to stay, yet he remained there, listening to the distant hum of the city and imagining Alex beside him. The tension between longing and guilt churned in his chest. He thought of Ryan, of loyalty, of comfort, of the life he had built with him, and felt a pang of shame. Yet the pull toward the unknown, toward the possibility Alex represented, was undeniable. Later that night, Ethan returned home to Ryan, who was waiting with quiet concern. "You're later than usual," Ryan said, voice calm. "Traffic," Ethan lied automatically. He placed his keys down, forced a smile, and joined Ryan on the couch. Every laugh, every casual comment, every touch of Ryan's hand felt heavier than usual, weighted with the knowledge that he was no longer fully present. He wanted to share, to confess, but the words stuck, choking in his throat. Days bled into nights, and Ethan found himself caught in the tension between two worlds, the predictable, safe life with Ryan and the charged, unknown possibility that Alex represented. He could no longer see the checkpoint as mere duty, nor Alex as just another officer. Both had become mirrors, reflecting parts of himself he had kept hidden, even from those he loved. One night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Alex's words, "That depends on what you decide when you're not here." He realized that the checkpoint had not just been a place of control and order, it had become a boundary, one he was slowly crossing. The thought terrified him, yet in that same fear was a strange exhilaration. He knew the next encounter would demand more than fleeting glances and guarded words. It would demand a choice, one he was not certain he was ready to make. As he drifted toward a restless sleep, Ethan understood the truth he had been avoiding: nothing would be the same. His life with Ryan was still present, tangible, familiar, but something had shifted irreversibly. The checkpoint, the conversations, the stolen moments of connection with Alex, they were a doorway, and he had already stepped across the threshold, whether he wanted to admit it or not. For the first time in a long while, Ethan did not feel entirely in control. And the realization, heavy and thrilling all at once, left him awake in the dark, heart racing, wondering if he was chasing something dangerous, or discovering a part of himself he had long denied. If you want, I can now combine all 4 sections into a cohesive 2,800-word story ready for a faceless video narration, ensuring smooth transitions, emotional hooks, and pacing optimized for retention. This will give you a fully polished final draft.